Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And although we're just a few days into this 2032 offseason, I think we've made some decent progress in terms of getting ahead of an offseason when we're going to be losing a ton of experienced major league talent. We've added couple of pitchers. Jamie DeVore picked up in a trade, and then we also added a minor league pitcher with a similar profile to Mr. DeVore. And as far as everyday players, we've made a trade for Xavier Isaac, who I think could be a productive left-handed hitter for us, and also made a trade for Kyle Manzardo, who's in the last year of a contract and we think could be a very good left-handed hitter for us. And perhaps most importantly, we've got an offer out to try to bring Colt Keith back for the next several seasons. He would be our big acquisition of this offseason if we're able to bring him back, but he has been incredibly productive in his 4 years in Oakland, averaging 35 homers and 114 ribbies a season over the 4 years. Negatively, he is 30 years old, fragile, and coming off of the worst season since his rookie year that he's had offensively. But looking at his ratings, still think that he can be productive, and he's also extremely popular, which, given that we have made up 4 points in fan interest this offseason, will give us another nice boost before we face some inevitable declines in fan interest when the likes of Ty Madden, Juan Soto, Brian Ramos, and possibly even Brian Ren-con and Chase Lee move on to other organizations. So with the moves that we've made, it's kind of fitting that we're talking about our shortstop Brian Ren-con right now, because who's going to play shortstop for us next year is probably the most significant question that I think we have at this point. We've got about $15 million available right now. That number will likely get a little bit higher. We still have to figure out what we're going to do with Chase DeLauder and a $6 million team option. If we can't trade him away, my hunch is we don't exercise the team option and don't bring him back, so that puts us to about $21 million. Should save a little bit more with a few end of the 40-man roster guys we're going to be moving on from or trading away, as well as some savings on some arbitration-eligible players that we're going to hopefully sign before arbitration hearings. So maybe could be in the neighborhood of $25 million or so, which would be plenty of money to bring back Ren-con. The issue, though, is that we don't have anything set aside in our draft budget right now. We're probably going to need in the neighborhood of $9 or $10 million there when all is said and done. And what that means is that essentially we're probably back to about where we are with $14, $15 million to spend this off season when we do get to the start of free agency. And if we devote a large chunk of that, or perhaps even all of that, to Ren-con, it will limit the rest of our options for the off season. I don't think we have a ton of other things that we need to do, but still want to spend that money for shortstop as efficiently as possible. I outlined in the last episode 3 options within our organization that I think could either single-handedly or more likely in some sort of platoon give us competent defense at shortstop with offense that will hopefully not be atrocious. So that's the fallback, but the hope is that either through Ren-con or somebody else, we might be able to put together an answer at shortstop for the 2033 season that is better than that. And I've been trying to think holistically about the problem that is Ren-con, more generally the problem that could be shortstop next year. As I mentioned, I think we've got a competent-ish solution in the organization. But I've also been thinking about the guys who could be on the free agent market next year. I think Cole Young is likely too expensive. And honestly, that's a borderline-ish shortstop profile for me as far as the defense that I'm looking for. CJ Abrams is a guy we've talked about the past few seasons. Again, probably about as weak defensively as I'd prefer to play at shortstop, but he still is a more than competent major league shortstop. Over the course of his major league career, he's been a 82 WRC plus player, so not great defensively, but not horrible. Maui Ahuna, 30-year-old, I don't love that he's fragile. I do like his defense. Over the course of his major league career, he's been an even worse offensive player, though, with just a 74 WRC plus. But certainly, if I could actually do things properly here and look at the upcoming free agents again, Abrams and Ahuna are more economical than Ren-con. Ren-con, just to remind you what he is, also fragile physically, some positive personality traits, a better glove than anybody that we've looked at so far, and a bat that has certainly been competent over his major league career. I know Jack Hammer Possessor mentioned in the last episode that he really doesn't like Ren-con's offense. Certainly coming off the worst year of his career with a 70 WRC plus. But he is a guy who's had a 93 WRC plus over the course of his career, and combining that with his excellent defense, he's basically been a 4-WAR player over every 162 games. So I think if we compare Ren-con to Abrams and Ahuna, Ren-con has been a better offensive player over the course of his career, and he's certainly a better defensive shortstop. Last guy who's a potential free agent that maybe you can think about is Yoshitoki Matsura. Also fragile, the oldest of the guys that we've talked about at 35, but just doesn't bring what we need defensively for a shortstop, even though the bat is unquestionably the best of the guys that we've looked at. I don't think we would reunite with Darryl Hernandez, again, with that range and that arm. Pretty borderline-ish for a shortstop, although the great error rating certainly helps. With the money he's looking for, probably not a direction that we'd go. So there are going to be options on the free agent market if we don't decide to reunite with Ren-con before we get to free agency. But I don't necessarily know that there's going to be any options that we're in love with. And then the last obvious thing to think about is, can we trade for somebody to take over at third base? So we've searched for good quality defensive shortstops who are, at least we believe, borderline competent offensively. And you can see there's about 12.5 guys in the majors who meet the criteria that we've outlined, including, of course, Ren-con. The issue is that some of these players are making insane amounts of money. Carson Williams, Marcelo Meyer, Khalil Watson, Cameron Cawley, our former player, Jordan Lawler, Carlos Correa still knocking around. And then there's a pretty good-sized crop of guys who are making less money. The problem is that the guys who are making huge money, we're going to have that salary obligation, and they're generally established major league stars who are also very expensive for us to attempt to pick up in a trade. And then these younger guys who are available, the prices for most of them are pretty extreme, unfortunately. Alexis Camacho of the Cincinnati Reds looks like a competent-ish hitter, pretty solid fielder, but he's fragile physically, not great personality traits. And if we try to trade for him, we've got no one in the organization who can get the deal done. And even if we start looking at the top prospects in our organization, we throw in Jesus Saldana, the top pitching prospect in our organization, and then we still need to add in a pretty important offensive player from our major league team, or someone who's on a really good contract. Again, for a guy who's competent offensively, not as good defensively as Ren-con is, and also fragile. It's certainly not a bargain for me, and I don't think it's necessarily a much better solution than just going with some of the younger guys within our organization. Julio Del Campo of the Seattle Mariners organization, like him defensively. Again, we think he's competent offensively, normal in terms of his injury proneness. But we're giving up one of the top prospects in our organization, or one of the top players on our major league team, including the starting pitching prospect that we just picked up that we think is pretty interesting, to pick up Del Campo. And again, the defense is a little better than the guys that we have right now lined up if Ren-con goes away. The offense is probably a little better than those guys as well. But is it the direction that we should go? The most reasonable price is Rogelio Vacadano of the Nationals organization. Competent defensively, positive personality. The question is whether he's really a major league hitter. But the positive thing about Vacadano is that there's a lot of options, at least, to bring him on board. Now, again, it's mostly really good major league players and or solid players on excellent contracts and or some of the top prospects in our system. But there are levers that we can press to bring Vacadano on board. I think he might be worse offensively than what we currently have in our organization. So the question is whether we're willing to pay that price. Alex Harrington of the Phillies would be an incredible acquisition. The best bat of anyone that we've looked at, and arguably the best glove of anyone that we've looked at. Coming off of a year where he hit .282 with a 117 WRC plus and a WAR of close to 7 for the Phillies, but not surprisingly, Saldana, Uresti, and Shiloh Solis together is still a proposal where we can't even add one more player and get the deal done. The one that I'm most marginally intrigued by, and you'll just have to trust me that there's not anything obvious and simple with any of these other players. I've gone through and looked at all of them. Joe Grandy from the Angels is mildly intriguing to me. Pretty good glove, a Ren-con level kind of glove. We only have high scouting accuracy on him now. Do like the contact, although we think his gap power, his home run power, and his eye are all below average. And over the course of his major league career, he's got a 65 WRC plus, so he's been a much worse offensive player than Ren-con at this point. But he is at least normal in terms of his injury proneness. Love the captain personality. But even a guy like Grandy, straight up, it's one of the top players in our organization to get him on board. The Angels are a team that places a little bit of value on Chase DeLauder, who we're looking to deal. But even if we include DeLauder, that just opens up a couple additional guys to get the deal done. And they're all still guys that are going to leave a big mark on our team for next year, or in the case of Uresti, force us to give up one of the top prospects in our organization. So although Grandy's glove is certainly better than the guys that we have in our organization, I'm not sure at almost 27 years old with a 65 WRC plus over the course of 4 major league seasons, whether he's the answer offensively. I tend to think, and I don't think anyone would really argue with me, that he's probably not. So to me, there's no perfect options in the trade market either. It's something that we can keep exploring over the next few weeks and as the offseason continues. The thing that stinks is that I'd love to be able to use Chase DeLauder as currency in a trade, and it doesn't seem like there's anything out there with shortstops or even other positions right now where DeLauder is going to really make me feel a lot better, including him in a trade, about the other players that I'd have to give up. So although he's got some value, it's not tipping point kind of value that can really save me a guy that I don't really want to get rid of in a trade. Which brings us back to Mr. Ren-con. And I think at this point we've got close to 10 of our members of our worldwide scouting department that have opined on what we should do with Ren-con, and just wanted to kind of go through what I just did in terms of the potential free agents and the potential guys in the trade market to provide a little more context around the decisions that we'll be making. I think the one thing that everyone who opined on Ren-con agreed with is that the 8 years at $12 million a year that he's looking for is not something that I think anyone would do. And I agree with this. If we were going to do something with Ren-con, I'd want fewer years and I'd want less money. So I think that everyone is aligned that what he's looking for right now does not make sense for our team given his age. He's going to be 29 by the start of next season, his fragility, and the fact that his batting has been trending in the wrong direction for 3 years in a row at this point. But interestingly, although I think we all agree that 8 years, $96 million is not something that we should be doing for Ren-con, the rest of the recommendations on Ren-con are kind of all over the map, which is really interesting. And I think it just highlights that I don't think there's a slam dunk correct decision for us here with Brian Ren-con. And as I noted, got a lot of thoughtful responses from our worldwide scouting department and a lot of viewers whose opinions I respect. But they're really all over the map, quite honestly. Alkshe says, yes, we should bring back Ren-con, but try to do it at a price that's a couple million less than he's looking for. Certainly a reasonable response and something I'm thinking about. In contrast, the notorious KEV basically says NFW on Ren-con. The money he's looking for, the fragility, the bat, just not something to think about. Paul West and Kevin McDowell also not really that excited about Ren-con. YME943, though, says be patient. Maybe we can get him cheaper down the road. Try to learn about those potential replacements, maybe put them through some defensive training programs to see if they can get closer to Ren-con defensively. I like that idea too, although I'm a little scared to put those guys in defensive programs right now, just on the fear that I wouldn't be able to have the long 3 to 4 month programs after they complete those programs. I'm kind of a little scared about that. I don't know the timing perfectly, even though we are only a day into the off season. Paul Hooper, kind of, I think, more similar to what Alkshe said. Don't pay him what he's looking for, but certainly think about bringing him back. Jackhammer Possessor, as we already noted, really doesn't like Ren-con's offense and the trend there. Fake Name suggests maybe giving him a qualifying offer. Avoid the long-term commitment. Bring him back for 1 year. Keep his good defense out there. Now, the qualifying offer is $18.9 million, so that's certainly a lot more than he's making right now, and more for next year than we'd likely need to pay him if we signed him to a longer-term deal. I know Jackhammer Possessor said he really didn't like that plan, but it is an interesting permutation because I think in a perfect world, if we could do something short with Ren-con, that would probably be the best solution for us. That said, I think he probably would accept that $18.9 million qualifying offer. And given that we do need to free up some more money just to get to $18.9 million, and again, that's assuming we don't have any money set aside for the draft, I think that's probably a little bit too expensive of an option for us. I'd love to submit the QO to him and have him refuse it so we could get some draft compensation if he went somewhere else. But as I said, I think with the numbers he's looking for, the fact that he's probably going to be making with a QO 7-ish, 8-ish million a year more than a long-term deal that he'd sign, he probably hits us up on this 1 year and then goes back on the free agent market next year. So there are a ton of different options available, not only with the different opinions on Ren-con, but as I mentioned, in other guys who might be free agents, can still keep investigating the trade market down the line. And you never know if maybe magically there will be an international free agent who happens to be a shortstop who works out perfect for us. Can't count on that happening, but it's a non-zero probability. So I think I am kind of inclined at this point to let things play out over the next few weeks, potentially let Ren-con hit free agency. And if we do decide that bringing him back is the right path in a few weeks, to try to do it for less years and less dollars than he's looking for right now, I think there's an argument that if we're going to do that, just try to sign him right now before he hits free agency. But quite honestly, I'm not convinced he's the right answer. I'm willing to think about it and consider it, but I don't view him as head and shoulders above the other potential options that we've talked about, and the chance that there could be some option that we haven't talked about out there through international free agency or some other magical developments. So I think I'm willing to let him hit the open market. Doesn't mean he won't be back, but it certainly doesn't guarantee that he will be either. And we've made a trade, and it is a very minor trade, but I have come to the decision that we are going to not make an offer to Ren-con now and wait to kind of see what things look like at the start of the free agent period. Because of that, wanted to see what kind of value, if any, I could get for Chase DeLauder with the additions of the left-handed bats, Manzardo and Isaac, and the fact that we're trying to bring the left-handed hitting Keith back. Definitely don't need DeLauder back. It's $6 million next year as a left-handed hitter. He will always have a special place in the history of the Oakland A's organization, as he was the ALCS MVP and the World Series MVP in 2029 when we shocked the world with the lowest payroll in baseball, beating the Dodgers with the highest budget in baseball in the World Series. But it's time for us to move on from DeLauder. We also had to include 23-year-old minor league pitcher Dave Mullins. Looks like he could be a useful back of the rotation or back of the bullpen major league arm. But with the 45 stuff, don't really see a scenario where he's more than that. In return, we got a little bit of cash, and we got a 24-year-old reliever, Ian Outh. He's got a great fastball. Honestly, he doesn't really have much of an out pitch at this point, but we do think the high end of his stuff is certainly more interesting. Think he could have above average movement and average control. On the margin, I view him as a little bit better of a prospect than Mullins, even though he's older, just by virtue of the better stuff that he's got. Don't think Outh is ever going to be a big-time player for us, but Mullins alone wouldn't let us get the deal done, including DeLauder. Let us get the deal done, so at least we extract some small bit of value, perhaps even more importantly than the small bit of value we've got. That does open up some additional money, as I noted. So I think we're going to start moving ahead a bit more rapidly now after I've been basically going nowhere for a few episodes at this point. We'll start finding out what happens with the salary arbitration eligible players we made offers to, what happens with Colt Keith. Hopefully some of those signings will boost our fan interest a bit more ahead of the inevitable declines when we lose some big players this offseason. And we'll also find out what goes on in the award season as that gets underway, and then whether or not maybe there's a Hail Mary player available for us in international free agency who could fill that potential gap for us at shortstop better than any of the other potential options that we've talked about that might be out there. And we've started to sign a number of minor league free agents, as well as, more importantly, the arbitration eligible players. The fans excited that Jackson Ferris will be back for a likely final year with us. Take a look at fan interest, and although it was a move up in theory, it was not significant enough to bump up the fan interest number. Still waiting at this point on the offer made to Colt Keith. He hasn't even given us any feedback yet, but certainly hope that we can get him locked up. So the arbitration eligible players are done, and the last opportunity for us to maybe boost fan interest a little bit before the start of free agency is whether or not we're able to lock up Colt Keith. And award season has gotten underway. We've signed all of our arbitration eligible players, all of the minor league free agents in our organization that we had made offers to. No Gold Glove winners, and we didn't win the Mariano Rivera Award this year, but still no feedback at all from Mr. Keith. We still have at this point exactly 2 weeks until the free agency filings, but certainly would love some initial feedback on what he's thinking about that offer that we made to him. And we do finally have an award winner, although it was a rental award winner, with Juan Soto being named the Silver Slugger winner in the American League for designated hitters. Combined between Oakland and Minnesota this year, he hit .287, 29 homers, 89 ribbies, with a 147 WRC plus. We'll certainly be missing his bat next year, and when he signs with somebody else, we'll certainly take a hit to our fan interest. So it is getting more and more critically important that we not only get Colt Keith signed, but that the fans are really excited to actually see Oakland retaining one of their top players. And we'll be moving to the Rookie of the Year award tomorrow, where we expect that we will have some potential contenders on the team, most notably Jake Ortega, who we think should have a pretty strong case for the award. Let's sim ahead and find out. And we do get a Rookie of the Year for the first time in this playthrough with Oakland, with Jake Ortega, a unanimous Rookie of the Year. Mike Reynoso of the Royals looks like he was second place on every ballot. The left fielder hit 275, 22 homers, 77 ribbies, and a 1.6 WAR. But the youngster Jake Ortega, who we signed to a long contract this past off season after he had hit just a $155 in his first 58 at bats, certainly made us feel good about picking him third overall 3 years ago, and also made us feel good about signing him to that contract, as he hit 316, third in the American League, 46 doubles, 18 homers, scored over 100 runs, and put up a 145 WRC plus with a 5.8 WAR. He was a bit above average defensively in left field and right field. Honestly, he was a bit below average in center field, but still is very close to an average defensive center fielder. And if we need to play him out there for a while when Luis Lara, who is fragile, is banged up, certainly will be comfortable with that. Now, as you saw, Ortega is also fragile at this point, but between the two of them, feel pretty confident that we're going to have some pretty good center field play over the next few seasons. And perhaps not shockingly, Shohei Bame, who we thought about signing as an international free agent last offseason, was also a Rookie of the Year over in the National League after he hit 259, 36 homers, 115 ribbies, 29 years old. Certainly a much more experienced player than our Rookie of the Year in Jake Ortega, but Ortega was also a unanimous winner, and he's making a fraction of what Bame made this past year and for the next several years to come. And Colt Keith never gave us any feedback after he made him the offer, but he is signed and on board. As I talked about last episode, there was no opportunity to bring him back with team options. We did get the contract to 5 years rather than 6, but he was pretty insistent on a player option for the final season of the deal. $18 million each of the next 3 years, which is palatable for the A's. I would assume we'll try to move on before that $25 million year in 2036. The issue is that he is going to be a 5 and 10 guy, or a 10 and 5 guy, depending on how you talk about it, after this next season. So that will give him an effective no trade clause, even though we didn't put one in the contract. So doesn't mean that he won't be willing to accept a trade somewhere else, but it could make it a little trickier for us to move him if we decide that we need to move him down the line. But with Colt Keith back, and with the additions of those other left-handed bats that I mentioned in Manzardo and Isaac, even though free agency hasn't started yet, feel like we've addressed the potential dearth of left-handed hitters that we were worried about, with the fact that the likes of Soto and DeLauder are going to be leaving us now. And the most interesting thing was going to be to check in on the boost to fan interest from Colt Keith. Only 1 point. But at 61, we're actually in that blue color, the very light blue color, but we haven't been in that color for many years. In fact, I don't know if we've ever had that color in this playthrough here. So a little bit of progress, but admittedly I am preparing myself for some declines in that metric as we lose our rentals, most notably Juan Soto and Ty Madden. And we've made it to the end of the awards season. The Silver Slugger for Juan Soto and the Rookie of the Year for Jake Ortega were the only awards that any of the A's picked up. Not surprisingly, Steve Tudor of the Royals, their incredible young pitcher, was a unanimous Cy Young Award winner. Led the league with 20 wins, 230 innings pitched, a 2.19 ERA, 85% quality starts, 58 FIP minus, and 8.6 WAR. The 24-year-old is now a multiple and back-to-back Cy Young Award winner, so looks like he could be in the early stages of a brilliant career. In the National League, Grayson Rodriguez, now of the New York Mets, was your unanimous Cy Young Award winner. Led the league with an 18-7 record, and he also won a pitching triple crown with 244 strikeouts and a 2.87 ERA, sub-1 WHIP, and a 7.1 WAR. So an excellent season for Grayson Rodriguez at the age of 32 with the Mets. American League MVP, Galterio Mancina, the young Kansas City Royal, had a monster year. Led the league with a 328 average, a 426 on-base percentage, and 123 runs, while also having 43 homers and 135 ribbies. He was a guy that we thought long and hard about pursuing in that first IAFA period in 2025. And in retrospect, wish that we had brought him on board. You can see a lot of Kansas City Royals among the top vote getters. Our young, now Rookie of the Year winner, Jake Ortega, was the only player on the Oakland A's to get votes towards the MVP award. Hopefully he'll continue to receive MVP votes going forward. And in the National League, Jackson Merrill of the San Diego Padres, shortstop, led the league with 49 steals while also hitting .325 with 33 homers and 100 ribbies. So 30-30 year for him. And he led the National League with a 7.8 WAR to win the first MVP award of his career. And we've made it now to the start of free agency. Before we check in on the hope that maybe there will be an international free agent who meets our needs, take a full look at our financial capabilities, and as expected, about $25 million when all was said and done. Taking a look at player development, we're going to need about $8.2 million for the draft, so we'll put in a placeholder with that amount here, and that still puts us in a position where we've got about $17.5 million to spend. As we've talked about, shortstop is our primary need at this point. There's certainly other options that we could pursue if we decide to go cheap, and with the guys in our organization, that does give us money to maybe add a pretty good starting pitcher if we're patient and someone lingers on the market, or potentially another useful bat or an arm or two out of the bullpen. Take a quick look at the top shortstops available on the free agent market, and I guess we'll actually see when I do this search whether or not there are any very highly regarded international shortstops who show up on the list. As expected, Cole Young, Junior Caminero, Brian Ren-con, C.J. Abrams, Maui Ahuna, Daryl Hernandez, Marco Luciano, Orelvis Martinez, and Matsura. So I think the list of the kind of 3-star and higher guys who made it to free agency is very similar to the list that we were looking at before. Ren-con number supposedly down to $11 million. Let's check in with him and see what he has to say. Yeah, he's looking for another year now, $9 million. or 9 years, but the annual amount is $1 million less at $11 million at this point. Maui Ahuna, I don't hate. He's also fragile, but he's also very good defensively, pretty solid speed. But admittedly, with a 74 WRC plus, he has been a much less productive major league player over the course of his career than Brian Ren-con has with that 93 WRC plus. 182 and 70 though in the last 3 years for Mr. Ren-con, while Mr. Ahuna 73, 68, 79. So he was better last year than Ren-con was offensively, but he has never even been within 20% of the league average as far as his WRC plus. So he has pretty consistently been a below average offensive player. I don't know that there's any obvious answers here. CJ Abrams, not as good defensively, but a better bat certainly than Ahuna. And then Cole Young, and for that matter, Junior Caminero, who's really more of a third baseman than a shortstop. I don't think those numbers are really realistic for us to go after. So if an Ahuna, a Ren-con, or an Abrams were to linger on the market, I think it's something to think about. I do like that it's still supposedly easy for us to sign Mr. Ren-con, but the dream of an obvious answer at shortstop through the international free agent class doesn't seem to be there, although maybe Ashley Andujar, although we've got very high scouting accuracy on him. Now he looks more like just a guy that happens to be a free agent, competent defensively, question how much he's going to hit. Maybe Victor Acosta is a... No, he's not an international free agent either, so doesn't necessarily look like there's an obvious answer for us on the free agent market. We'll check in on the international free agents and see if there's anyone who piques our interest. Chisen Harimoto out of Japan. Looks like a potentially incredible left-handed reliever, but he's looking for around $15 million a year. Certainly would like to know more about him, but that price is going to have to come down pretty significantly for us to be interested in Cooter Harimoto. Domingo Guardian. Looks like he's already signed with the Schaumburg Boomers. Must be a independent league team. So he's not an option for us. He wouldn't have been a bad guy to bring into the minor league organization, but I guess we could purchase him for $250,000. So maybe we'll request an updated scouting report on him. He might not be bad in terms of some organizational depth for us, but not the most impressive class of international free agents that we've ever seen. But we do have money to spend. If you've got any real strong thoughts on Ren-con versus the youngsters in our organization versus one of the other potential free agents versus making a trade, would love to hear your thoughts on that topic, because solving the problem at shortstop is likely to be our primary goal this offseason. And we will hopefully begin making some progress towards that goal in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.